Greetings, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Brandon Kyle. I am the Executive Director of Alumni and Family Engagement and Annual Giving at Pitzer College. Thank you so much for joining us for our final Pitzer at Home Presents Conversation of the Year. We are so incredibly thrilled to have you joining us this evening. In the spring of 2020, the Pitzer College Art Galleries and the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement launched a new collaboration to connect our community together during a time of increased social distancing. Through that collaboration, we've been able to produce a series of incredible conversations while showcasing outstanding artistry in many forms. This culminating event is held in conjunction with the exhibition Sadie Barnette, Legacy and Legend, a partnership between Pitzer College Art Galleries and the Benton Museum of Art at Pomona College. Tonight's event is made possible through the Murray Pepper and Vicki Reynolds Pepper Distinguished Visiting Artist and Scholar Endowed Fund at Pitzer College. Established in 2007, this fund helps bring critically acclaimed artists and scholars to campus. These remarkable visitors add vibrant texture to the fabric of our campus through their seminars, hands-on workshops, public talks, and one-on-one conversations with students, faculty, and the Claremont College community. We deeply appreciate and thank Murray Pepper and Vicki Reynolds Pepper for establishing this lecture fund. Thank you again for enhancing the college's ability to provide thought-provoking and perspective-changing experiences to our community of seekers and learners. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our host and moderator for tonight's discussion, Kiara Ennis, Director and Curator of the Pitzer College Art Galleries. Since 2007, Dr. Ennis has created exhibitions that examine the constructed nature of historical and cultural records. We are pleased to have her moderate tonight's event. Thank you so much, Kiara.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. Just one minor correction. I'm not actually moderating today. I'm introducing our panel. That's fine. But thank you for the lovely introduction. We are also so delighted to be working with you, Brandon, and for the last year and a half, and your office, and look forward to many, many more collaborations with you. Before introducing our remarkable panelists, I would like to extend my thanks to those who have made this event possible. And to begin with, I would also like to express the gallery's sincerest and deepest thanks to Murray Pepper and Vicki Reynolds Pepper for supporting this lecture series, without which we wouldn't be able to bring our extraordinary speakers, like our panelists today, to Pitzer. As many of you know, and as Brandon mentioned, this panel is taking place in conjunction with the Sadie Barnette show, Legacy and Legend. As such, I would like to thank my dear friend and amazing co-curator of this project, Rebecca McGrew, who is the senior curator at the Benton. It's always a very special treat for me to work with Rebecca, and I look forward to many more collaborations in the future. I'd also like to extend my deepest thanks to Chris Michno, Exhibitions and Communications Manager at Pitzer College Art Galleries, and to our preparator, Michael Wisniewski. And of course, my sincerest thanks also go to the Benton Museum team, in particular, the museum's new director, Victoria Sancho-Lobis, as well as Gary Murphy, Steve Comber, Gillian Holzer, Claire Nettleton, and Justine Bay. And most of all, Rebecca and I would like to thank Sadie for creating such an extraordinary exhibition, which has generated such rich and layered discussion across our campuses over this semester. So heartfelt thanks to you, Sadie. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to start with Sadie, who has a BFA from CalArts and an MFA from the University of California, San Diego. Sadie has been awarded grants and residencies from the Studio Museum in Harlem, Arcadia, Art Matters, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, the Headland Center for the Arts, and from Camargo Foundation in France. Her work is in the permanent collections of LACMA in LA and at the Brooklyn Museum, the Guggenheim Museum, and the Studio Museum in Harlem, in New York. Sadie's work is also in the collection of Oakland Museum of California and at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. as well as at the Brooklyn Museum and the Studio Museum in Harlem. At present, Sadie is working on a permanent site-specific commission for the Los Angeles International Airport to be unveiled in 2024, and is currently an artist fellow at UC Berkeley's Black Studies Collaboratory. She is represented by Charlie James in Los Angeles and Jessica Silverman in San Francisco, where her exhibition Inheritance is currently on view. And Sadie lives and works in Oakland. Sadie's father, Rodney Barnette, was born in 1944 and is the youngest of 11 children. By age 17, his experiences of racism, police brutality, and white supremacy led him to the fruit of Islam as a follower of Malcolm X. In 1966, he was drafted and sent to Vietnam, where he fought against discrimination in the military. After returning, he participated in the anti-war movement. And after drawing connections between America's war abroad and its war against its own African-American population at home, founded the Compton Chapter of the Black Panthers in 1968. While a college student in San Francisco, he was invited to organize with the National Committee to Free Angela Davis. After her release, he turned his attention to the labor movement, first as a factory worker and later as a union representative. Equally important and always interconnected has been his dedication to family and community. In the early 90s, he opened the first Black-owned gay bar and nightclub in San Francisco with the help of many of his brothers, and facilitated a space of progressive dialogue and celebration. I'd now like to introduce Ericka Huggins, who is an educator, leading Black Panther Party member, former political prisoner, human rights advocate, and poet. For 50 years, Ericka has used her life experiences in service to community. From 1973 to 1981, she was director of the Black Panther Party's Oakland Community School. From 1990 to 2004, Ericka managed HIV/AIDS volunteer and education programs. She also supported innovative mindfulness programs for women and youth in schools, jails, and prisons. Ericka was professor of sociology and African American studies from 2008 through 2015 in the Peralta Community College District. From 2003 to 2011, she was professor of women and gender studies at California State Universities, East Bay, and San Francisco. Ericka is a racial equity learning lab facilitator for World Trust Educational Services. She curates conversations focused on the individual and collective work of becoming equitable in all areas of our daily lives. Additionally, she facilitates workshops on the benefit of spiritual practice in sustaining social change. And moderating the panel today is Professor Valorie Thomas, the Spalding Professor of English and Africana Studies at Pomona College, where she teaches and publishes on African American and diaspora literature. Thomas originated the theory of racial, cultural, and diasporic vertigo as decolonizing sensorium, which centers decolonial somatics. Additionally, Thomas is developing pedagogies exploring race, gender, embodiment, and relational ties to place and memory through equine facilitated learning. She curated the 2019 photography exhibition Selected Works from Kevin Adonis Brown's book, High Mass, Carnival, and the Poetics of Caribbean Culture, and the 2015 multimedia exhibition and symposium, Vertigo at Midnight, New Visual Afrofuturisms and Speculative Migrations. So thank you all so much again for spending your time with us today. I'm so excited about this talk. I'm now going to disappear and leave you in Valerie's capable hands. But thanks again.
Thank you so much, Chiara. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I just wanted to acknowledge that we are in our various places, I myself am on Tongva land, and I just want to make that land acknowledgement as we start. And this is where our museums are, where our exhibition spaces are as well. I believe that we're actually going to start our conversation today with Sadie, who has prepared a slideshow for us and will give us the introduction, our entryway into our longer conversation today. So I'm going to just actually turn it right over to you, Sadie, and then we'll rejoin the conversation, all of us together. And at the end, we will have time for a question and answer period. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Sadie.
Well,
Hi.
thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I also do have a few thank yous just really quickly to mention. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And I always want to start by thanking those that came before me, both on this land, in my profession, my ancestors, and my family. I really want to thank Rebecca and Kiara for facilitating and caring for my vision with this exhibition. I want to thank the students at Pomona and Pitzer for spending time with my work and even writing papers about it. And I certainly want to thank my father for trusting me with this story. And I want to thank Ericka for joining us today and for inspiring us always. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And just really quickly, for those who might not be familiar with my work or the exhibition, I use photography, drawing, sculpture, installation, really anything I can get my hands on to tell my family story as it relates to local and global histories, but also honestly, just as a way of witnessing and grounding and moving through this world. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the core elements of my two-site exhibition and offer this work up for our talk today, which is really just such an honor. So for me, the show really starts at the Benton site, which represents the legacy in the two-part title. So that is the image that you're looking at right now. The background of this project is that my family filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 2011. And after 5 years of going back and forth with the FBI, we uncovered a 500-page surveillance file amassed on my father during his time with the Black Panthers in Southern California and his time fighting for Angela Davis's freedom up here in the Bay Area. Now, one thing I want to point out, it's a surveillance file, and that word might sound to some people like it's this passive information collecting, but what we know from studying history and what we found much evidence of in this file was that it's intimidation, it's harassment, it's agent provocateurs, it's fomentation of personal disputes, right? It's so much more than surveillance. It's tragically, even assassination. So really I was left chilled, emotional, reading this file as a family. I realized how lucky I am that my father is alive, lucky I am that I was born. And so I knew that I needed to reclaim this file, turn it into art, make it do something different, and really make it live in our world. So these are 12 large-scale graphite drawings that you're looking at here, and this sculpture in the center. So I'll start with this. This sculpture is actually called Home Good Centerpiece, and it's a found and altered coffee table with mirror and plexi wood rose inlays you can see on the bottom, and these glitter surveillance cameras. So here I'm thinking about, domestic space, living rooms where we congregate as a family, the epicenter of the home, these spaces that are supposed to be private and personal, but as we know, are not impervious to the lens of state surveillance. But I'm also thinking about a kind of counter surveillance by, glitterizing these surveillance cameras and thinking about some type of restorative technology, perhaps. Here's a detail of the surveillance cameras and the wood inlay. And so, as I mentioned, there are these 12 large-scale graphite drawings. And really, as I continued working with this source material, I found that making these large, slow, handmade drawings really held a lot of weight and claimed space, and underscores that this project is one of redress. So you can see the file pages are tonally inverted. So it's white text on black. And I'm further, transmuting the original source and intent. And these are rendered in a heavy application of powdered graphite on white paper. And they're 60 inches tall by 48 inches wide. So if you can kind of imagine, instead of a computer screen right now, that you're looking at, this dark, deep surface texture of these drawings. They're really dark, but they also have a bit of metallic sheen to them, and there's slight variation in the cloudiness. And what you would do if you were in the presence of them is you want to get up really close and see whether they're really handmade or not. And I promise that they are. So I'll walk you very quickly through some of the elements of what each page might do or be about. This page, this drawing is entitled Informants. And so you can see that all of these redactions are mentioning a Los Angeles informant. And here I'm really thinking about, how can we hold compassion for those who have been, coerced into being informants. And I'm not just doing this, to be nice, but to think about how the system and the prison industrial complex manipulates all of us. And you can see there's this spray paint on top of the drawing. So I'm doing that, really thinking about like my generation as an 80s baby, and graffiti and tagging, and also thinking about, what would really piss off J. Edgar Hoover the most would be this, pink splashed all over the files. And J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI for almost 50 years. And I'm sure we have some history students with us who might know, what a tyrannical figure and how little accountability he had during his reign. So here's another drawing. This one is entitled No Violence. And you can see here that I'm using these roses, and I'm really thinking about roses as a way to honor, to mourn those that we've lost. I think to add life to these documents, and thinking about, ways that we take care of each other. We give each other flowers when we're sad or when we want to say, I love you. So you can see here a detail of the, pixelation within the FBI file. When we actually received the document, it was as digital information, which to me just points, to a lot of connections, which I'm sure we'll talk about further in the talk, to surveillance today. This slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I also hope we can come back to this details the fact that my father was fired from his job at the post office for the reason being living with a woman he wasn't married to. Of course, the real reason was his political involvement. We don't always think about employment as something that can be taken away for political reasons, but that's absolutely one of the effects of this state repression and intrusion. And in the second paragraph, my father really gives this very human voice to his story. So I hope we can talk about that. This page is entitled Racial Matters. You can see it's basically all redacted, and sometimes what isn't there is just as significant as what is. And these roses, to me really felt like a wallpaper, a kind of fading wallpaper, again, thinking about the domestic and living spaces. This drawing is entitled Observed. It's such a simple moment, but really kind of almost acts like a photograph and capturing, this image of Angela Davis and my father at the airport. This is 11 days after Angela's been acquitted. There's never any charge against my father, but yet they're being, tailed at the airport. And here's a detail that shows how the roses really interact with the bureaucratic information. And this page features these Hello Kitties. So of course, thinking about this father-daughter conversation, I'm thinking about, you know, what if there's this little like people's army of Hello Kitties that can somehow scramble this, you know, state surveillance. This particular page of the FBI file is talking about, it's basically the Black Panther newspaper, which was, you know, integral to the organizing efforts and information sharing efforts. The newspaper is being used as a place to find individuals to surveil and perhaps photographs of individuals. So, you know, we know that information sharing was considered very dangerous. Paul Coates, Ta-Nehisi Coates' father, was also under surveillance simply for running a Black literature store. J. Edgar Hoover famously said that the most dangerous element of the FBI, or excuse me, of the Panthers, was the free breakfast program. So books, newspapers, and free breakfast, that's how people are going to be politicized. That's how people are going to come together. That's how people are going to know that, the government isn't taking care of them. And so that is considered extremely dangerous. This is the last image I'll share from the drawing series. This is obviously a mugshot of my father, and I'm thinking about how a mugshot functions to really criminalize and instantly dehumanize someone, turn them into a number. Thinking about this image on hundreds of FBI desks across the country. It's obviously had been photocopied so many times. That's how you get this, posterized quality to it. And so thinking about, can I, by drawing it and spending time with it, turn it into, a portrait of a hero? And can I reclaim that through my act of making? Here's a detail. And then just really quickly for the last, minute, I will say that the second part of the exhibition continues at Pitzer. And to me, this is the legend part of the two-part title, and really thinking about spaces and rooms for magic, rooms for possibility and dreaming, space and objects that pay tribute to the moments of beauty and hospitality and togetherness that we manifest even amidst everything that we're up against. So you can see here is a holographic couch, a wallpaper. Here's a close-up, a pink linoleum floor. This happens to be a photograph of myself, apparently jumping on the bed, holding a pink fluffy teddy bear with a side ponytail and aviator glasses. And the wallpaper behind is like this Afro pick with a little bow tied around it. On the wall next to that, you have this pink glitter wall with these pink glitter metal flake speakers, and this drawing, also powdered graphite drawing, that reads, "We all we got," which in some ways could be kind of a thesis of this family moment, we all we got. And then you have this salon wall, which really pays tribute to the way you might see photographs hung in a family home, and thinking about how we take care of our stories, how we preserve our stories, how we pass stories down from generation to generation. Here's a detail. And this is the very last image that I'll leave you on. It's just this kind of very small, simple moment that I think so many people can just relate to, of like this wide-eyed child in a very grown-up world, having his own interior experience. And these are the kind of tiny moments that are at stake under, these systems and these forces that we are trying to work our way out of. So I will leave it there, and I'm just very thrilled that we can, come together and kind of enact some of the familial strength and beauty and bonds that I'm talking about together today. Thank you so much.
And thank you. It was a lovely presentation, and I'm really happy that everybody is going to have these images right in the forefront of our minds as we move into talking about your work today. I wanted to just for the audience to let people know that you're welcome to enter your questions into the chat at any time. And what we'll be doing is gathering them and then coming back to them at the end of the discussion. So if things come up and you want to let us know what your questions are along the way, that's a way to do it. And we'll get to as many. We probably won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as possible. So just to get things rolling, Sadie, I really am, we did have a little bit of an opportunity to meet as a panel, or as we were calling it the other day, a circle, and to think of this conversation in that way. And so I'm hoping that maybe you and your dad, you and Rodney, might have maybe a way to get us started thinking about like your inspiration coming into the project. I know everybody's curious about you mentioned already some in your introduction about the things that inspired you. And one of the things I think we might consider as we go in is just like, how does healing work in this for you? And is that a thing that mutually both of you think about?
Thank you. Well, I just, I'm sure we'll unpack it more, but I think I have just always thought that my family was amazing and beautiful, both for the ways that it is unique and for the ways in which these are common stories that we see around. So sometimes I tell people, I wanted to tell the story of my father, not only because he's unique and special, but because his story actually repeats in so many Black families throughout the country and in so many different generations, even within our family, you can see repetition. And so I think, just being who I am as an artist, it's just the way I move through the world. That's what I got. So I was always kind of observing my family, wanting to capture, wanting to preserve, wanting to take a photograph, wanting to jot down a story. And so, little by little, as I built my practice, I've been able to fold my family in even more and even more. And I think receiving the FBI document really was kind of a container that forced us to really talk about these stories and really take care of them. And as far as, care and healing, I certainly think of, making these drawings and offering these drawings as a type of repair, but it isn't like to complete something or, to sew it up and now it's fixed. It's more like a process and a journey and an ongoing journey, a way of being in the world that tries to, offer repair as a kind of modality. Dad, did you want to jump in? And
well, I just like to say that for 50 years, I always wondered what involvement the FBI had in my background. I knew when I was involved in the Panthers, even before that, when I was involved in civil rights, that something was not right. And I ran into characters that I had suspicions of. And for many years, I wanted to know if the FBI had files on me and if there were informants and agent provocateurs that tried to set me up for to commit crimes and things like that. And I was so happy when we tried to get the files. And the first thing Sadie said was she was going to make art of it. And I couldn't really picture how she could do that, but I'm so proud of how she has went about and, created this file and created artwork out of it and reflecting the history of what we went through as a family. The FBI, like Sadie said, it's not just surveillance, it's harassment. I got out of the Army out of the war in Vietnam. I was drafted. I didn't really want to go. There wasn't much of a anti-war movement that early when I was drafted. But I got wounded in Vietnam and came back and found the police conducting military type operations in the Black community. They were doing things that we were restricted against in Vietnam. We couldn't bother civilians or go in civilians' houses. And when I saw in the news that the LAPD were just lined up, just like we were in the war, going through people's property without any warrants or anything like that. And then there were shootings and killings of Black people. So I just said, I think it's my responsibility to join an organization that was involved in doing something about that and trying to help the community. And anyhow, that's how I got involved with all the best intentions. And as I joined and time went by, I could see that there was interference along the way. And I always wondered who and how, to what degree this interference took place. And now with those files, I can see clearly, that what the interference was widespread. I was shocked that there was 500 pages on me, myself.
Mhm.
Not only that, they had pages, a file on me when I was 17 years old, because I followed Malcolm X. And then, I could go on and on, but I don't want to keep talking about that part. So anyhow, I was just so happy that Sadie wanted to take that on and to create her art from the files.
Mhm. Well, thank you both for addressing my question and in that kind of, in that detail and touching on so many points. It's something to really take in, when you talk about that awareness that you think it's there, or you kind of know it's there, you have that understanding that the probability is there. And it took till 2011, you said, when you filed the Freedom of Information Act paperwork for that to come through, and you to have that, like, validation and affirmation of all of that. So that's even an amazing story. This is really something to think of, walking through the world, as Sadie said, like how we walk through the world and how these kinds of forces, invisible forces, very often might be shaping us. But I also wanted to make sure that I invite Ericka into the conversation right here. Ericka, do you have any thoughts on this particular thread?
I have lots of thoughts and lots of feelings. And each time I look at Sadie's work, Sadie, thank you so much. And Rodney, thank you for what you just said. Um, I remember so many things. Each time is a different set of memories flooding forth because I was in the Black Panther Party from 1967 to 1981. And so I got to see the ways in which the forces, I want to say they're dark forces. They're forces that are not for upliftment. They intend to misrepresent and discredit. And as J. Edgar Hoover's counterintelligence program mission statement says, further neutralize Black liberation movements. I remember talking to a group of 4th and 5th graders, and they wanted to know about COINTELPRO because they were studying the Black Panther Party in their class with their magnificent teacher. They were studying movements in general, and they didn't leave it out, the Black Panther Party. There used to be a time when the Black Panther Party was left out of discussions about movements because, what's that word we like to use? Controversial. What's controversial is the way in which the United States was so wholeheartedly invested in a project of owning humans and built an economy and structures supported by it, African peoples and indigenous peoples as well, and many others. And so when those 4th and 5th graders and I were talking about, they said, what was it called, this thing that stalked and watched and bugged and harmed and jailed and beat and killed? And I said it was the counterintelligence program of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I said in its mission statement, it said, we will disrupt, discredit. It goes on for a while and then says, we hope to further neutralize Black liberation movements, not just the Black Panther Party, although it was the main focus. And I asked the children, what did they think the word neutralize meant? And one little boy said, it means to make it gone. And a wise little girl said, it means to dissolve it, to kill it. And we were quiet for a moment, because I think that sometimes quiet is the way, in the quiet, we can understand something from our hearts. And so what was my feeling? What were my thoughts? I was remembering my first husband, John Huggins, who was killed by an orchestrated event in broad daylight on the UCLA campus on January 17th, 1969. He was a member of the Black Panther Party, and the person killed with him was also. But as Sadie said earlier, what COINTELPRO did was push against any door that was open. And if there were organizations that were working together, close the doors between them and create barriers. And in addition, then, work, because the COINTELPRO worked also in the news media. I don't know if people understand this. They were everywhere. And this was paid for by taxpayers' money. So my mother and father's little checks were going into this. So what the news media said is that two rival Black organizations pitted against each other killed John Jerome Huggins Jr. and now Prentice Bunchy Carter, both members of the Black Panther Party. That isn't true. And I could tell you story after story after story about how I know it isn't true, including, I will tell you this one thing, that a former FBI informant came to tell me that he couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, he couldn't live with the fact that he knew that on the day that John and Bunchy, Al Prentice Carter, were killed, that the Westwood office near UCLA campus was in turmoil, and the lead at that office was hysterical, running around saying, "We messed up. We weren't supposed to kill anybody. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." But it did. They were 21. John was 21 and Bunchy was 23. And I was a 20-year-old new mother of a 3-week-old baby. So they did harm, and they never were accountable for that harm, as Sadie said. So I have a memory of that day, and also the fact that we were arrested that day as if we were the persons creating crime. And I know that Rodney and John and Al Prentice and Fred Hampton, and also the ways in which Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, co-founders of the party, were treated, and Angela Davis and Kathleen Cleaver. It goes on and on and on and on. Hundreds and hundreds of people and their families were impacted. So I'm thinking of all those families today. You know, we are alive. And the way in which I have to look at that is that I'm so glad that I'm alive to say out loud what was hidden. And I'm so grateful to Sadie for taking redacted documents and filling them with her love for her father, her love for her people, and her love for humanity. It's a brilliant labor of love. Each installation of Sadie's that I see touches my heart. So I'll stop there. I have so many thoughts and so many feelings.
Wow, it's so personal. You know, I just want to briefly say, you know, so that I'm not being abstract at all. It's like when I say that I read the file, and I'm so lucky that my dad is alive and that I was born, you know, it's literally because of Ericka's family story that she's sharing that I know how close my father was to death. You know, why do I get to have my father and Ericka's daughter doesn't? You know, that is basically what I'm walking into with the studio when I say, okay, you better figure this out and tell the story, because it is literally your job and your inheritance. And also, why even bother? You know, like when things are so messed up, why even bother to show up? But that's also something that I learned from Ericka and from my father, because both of them are so, you know, light-filled and positive and humorous and beautiful, and just move through this world in a way that lets you know that, you know, we're not waiting for the systems to topple to be fabulous and to love each other and to like live lives of poetry and beauty and romance. You know, we're not waiting for that permission. And so I feel like really specifically, you know, this peace and calm and steadiness that you get from listening to Ericka talk about the most painful things, that's, you know, what reminds me that it's important to just, you know, show up and yeah, it's impossible to describe, but that's a bit of how I'm thinking about it.
Sadie, I want to say something. What was the name of the installation at the Oakland Museum that the exhibit that honored the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party? This year is the 55th year, just to give people context. But what did you call your installation?
Right. So my installation was called My Father's FBI File. I think at that time it was the first project. It was the first time I showed the work. And I knew that it would be contextualized, you know, in this important moment for Oakland, which was that Oakland Museum's All Power to the People, Black Panthers at 50 exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to remind you that, and I'll tell the story in a second, but I want to remind you that because of your love for your father and those redacted files, and it doesn't really matter how many black marks are on them. We know what they did, don't we, Sadie? We know. As if there were no disguise. So I want to remind you of and let everybody know that because of you, my daughter got a glimpse in the most amazing way of what was done. I mean, she's known all her life about what killed her father and what left her grandmother without a son, her only son, and what left her aunts without their little brother. And the same is true for the Carter family, and all the families. But standing there in front of your installation that day, my daughter and I were just looking at all of the files, the redacted files to honor your father, and the pink glitter, and just the way you just turned it upside down and inside out so that we had to look at it. So we had to approach it from the standpoint of love. And I'm standing there with my daughter. She's standing close to me, and we're looking at the wall, and she points to one of the documents on the wall in front of us. and she simply says, "Mommy, look." And she holds her finger on a line in a file, and it says, "John Huggins, Jr." And we stood there speechless that this would be at the Oakland Museum on this day honoring the Black Panther Party. There would be a woman named Sadie Barnette that takes FBI documents, COINTELPRO documents, and makes a loving homage to humanity.
Mhm.
And we just stood there. And then I wanted to find you, and I did. And so when you think you have your daddy and my does not, well, you gave her a bit of him that day. And you continue to do a lot for the members of the Black Panther Party and all of the liberatory movements, all of them, because we worked in coalition. We weren't just in silo formation. That's what was so frightening to the FBI and the United States government. We were Latinx, Asian Pacific Islanders, and we were mixed roots. We were African American. We were from Africa. We were from Europe. We were everywhere. And the fear-based thinking was, let's stop it. Let's kill it. Let's neutralize it. And so I am just so happy, Rodney, that you are alive, that somehow you are alive, that somehow I'm alive. I think about that every day. As my auntie says, I'm vertical. And that's a gratitude. So I think that we're all here on purpose. And I just want to thank you again, Sadie. You've done something phenomenal. You are doing phenomenal things.
One of the things that I'd kind of like to add, a lot of people don't know that the COINTEL program was illegal. It was in violation of the Constitution of the United States, and it was done in, what's the word, in secrecy anyhow. And you can go online even to this day, and there are over 300,000 pages of COINTELPRO, illegal things that J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI conducted. Over 300,000 files. And that's only the ones that they released. And they released them because the Congress got complaints and found out that they were initiating this undercover operation, and people were complaining and being hurt by it. And they demanded, that's how the Freedom of Information Act came about, that gave the right to people to access their own files that the FBI may have on them.
You know, thank you, Rodney. You reminded me of something, and that is, and Sadie, I'm not sure I told you this, but at one point in the mid-70s, when I was working at the Oakland Community School, an elementary school that the Black Panther Party started in Deep East Oakland, and one day Huey Newton asked me to check out the Freedom of Information Act and get the files on the Black Panther Party. And he meant the Black Panther Party, not just one person or the other. And within some months, about 25 or 30 boxes, then the documents were in paper. Now you can ask for them if anybody's wanting to know how do you get them through the Freedom of Information Act. Now they come on CDs or something like a CD. Anyway, these boxes arrived in my office at this elementary school where there were children playing and laughing, and I opened one box And I began to read, understanding what I was reading. And I read about the trial I was on and how that was orchestrated, and my incarceration and separation from my daughter right after her father was killed was there. And the ways in which they wanted to drive Huey P. Newton crazy. And the ways in which they arrested Bobby Seale in New Haven, Connecticut, where I was on trial for no reason. He had done nothing. I had done nothing. And box after box after, I opened all the boxes, and I was intending to collate and codify these documents. I got physically ill. And I'm not a person who gets sick quickly. I don't want to. I don't have any need for it. And I keep my body and mind strong. But this was debilitating because it was the intention of harm, the intent to kill. It was obvious that bodies were disposable, that life wasn't a priority. Well, some lives didn't matter. So I didn't do it. I packed the boxes up and they went wherever they went, but I could not do it. It was not healthy. Mm-hmm. And then later in time, I thought, J. Edgar Hoover was unhealthy. Mm-hmm. We live in an unhealthy society. And if we are wanting to become healthy, then we need to tell the truth about it. We don't need to wallow in it, but tell the truth. And so, you know, remembering this today for some reason, it's not somber, it's not sad, but it is a part of history that we don't often talk about. Party members talk about it all the time. People in the civil rights movement talk about it all the time. Black Lives Matter knows what COINTELPRO was, although it exists with a different name. But, you know, it was amazing what they did. It was a gangster organization in the middle of the FBI, clandestine. And when J. Edgar Hoover got feedback about stopping it, he'd pull out a file on that congressperson or that politician or that vice president or president. So it's all very interesting. However, we still did wonderful things. We still continue to do art, and we continue to revel in each other's magnificence. And we continue to tell the children that there are dreams and anything is possible. So I just wanted to uplift us a little bit, having talked about all of that is not particularly uplifting.
I want to come in right there, Ericka, and say that's really resonating so strongly for me right now. And just as you're speaking, because for me, I really find the invitation in the work, in Sadie's work, yes, because of the, you know, the willingness to look at that dark, neutralizing, dissolving energy, but at the same time to insist care in and to insist the love in. And that tension for me, or that invitation, also turns toward realizing those movements, however they were misrepresented or labeled or criminalized, but those movements came out of love. You know, those movements came out of people with love for one another and for their communities and for our histories and for humanity. And there's a great humanizing element for me in Sadie's work there, to like refuse beautifully, like to use beauty and to use grace and to create space to refuse that annihilating impulse and to reclaim these stories, right? To reclaim memory. I think you used the word reclaim a few times, and to bring memory back in a way that acknowledges that these are people, these are regular people doing amazing things on behalf of, on behalf of that inspiration of care, on behalf of that inspiration of just having a life that's full and being able to live your life as a human being, however you interpret that, as full, and fully imagine like a whole range of emotions, like the cute ones of the Hello Kitty-ness and the sparkles, that is like such, it is so just like gentle. So I also want to say with that, like I really feel, Ericka, what you're talking about bringing that also the beauty, the light, and the great feeling, the great emotional feeling into it, because it's really makes us remember. It makes us get like, okay, there was all this violence happening around to suppress these movements and the politics of it. But right there in the middle of it, that you could still find, Sadie, that, those seeds of love, just incredible.
Well, they're there, and it's because of, the way that people continue to show up for this work and to continue to, have the audacity to dream about a world that could be different, and continue to show up. Like, who am I to not be hopeful when I see people doing that work, both historically and today? I mean, I think it is always important to connect, this issue of state surveillance, which we can understand as just like one arm or one tentacle of, a massive system of repression that involves, prisons and involves police and involves, economic deprivation to the point where people need to do things that are, then considered illegal. So all of these things operating together. And I think that, today, I mean, as Ericka kind of touched on, we found out a couple of years ago that there was a new FBI category called Black identity extremists. I think this came out in 2017. And so it's, this basically this hallucination of the FBI that there is this like, extremist, group of Black activists. And it's the same kind of conflation of when Black people are doing community organizing, it's considered so antithetical to the racist principles that this country was literally founded on, that it must be, criminal and violent and opposed to everything that this country, keeps choosing to stand for. And especially also, today our Muslim families are under extreme surveillance. I keep on hearing all different types of, reports coming out about mosques being, surveilled and infiltrated. And so it's definitely not, that these issues are relics of the past at all, but how, can we connect to very much ongoing, continuing challenges of today. And I do hope that, by taking this historical lens, it can be, a template for talking about still what's going on today, and usually with, constitutional lawyers and digital, security strategists and people who have much more vocabulary than I do. I hope that, I'm connecting those threads for them to then talk about.
I see that there. Thank you. And thanks for taking it there. I mean, I'm thinking like one of the things that really just was like amazing for me in seeing the part 2 of the exhibition and the living room, was like that idea, like the poetics that you've created around that idea of living room. There's so many ways and to work that phrase, and being invited into the living room with all of this history, and it's monumental history, it's large scale, epic history, but to come into the space of like, this is somebody's house. And in fact, we had a kind of couch like that with this plastic on it. This is very familiar. It wasn't a holographic couch that I really need in my own living room right now. But I mean, the familiarity of it, and even like the speakers, and just calling to sound, like calling to the sound of the moment, and the sound and the way that sound like has sustained us, and song and vibration and rhythm also through survival, I think was really prominent for me in that. And so many threads coming together in that space and around the space. So appreciated that very much as well. Ericka, were you going to say something?
I was, but I feel like
Come on, say it.
I just thought about what Rodney said in the document you said you wanted to go back to, Sadie, when he was accused of, it was a problem that he was living with a woman he wasn't married to. And when I first saw that document and read it, part of me was laughing out loud, with all the craziness that goes on in respectable, quote unquote, society, not even hidden from plain view. But Rodney, I just loved what you said in response to this supposed post office person that was setting you up to be fired. What was it that you said? Because I thought it was like so amazing and so humane and compassionate, and it also pointed up something else that we are talking about here. The other part of what frightened them was that we weren't just one identity. They couldn't pigeonhole us. I have never considered myself just a woman, or just a Black woman, or just a mother, or just an anything. I'm all these coinciding identities. And so are you, Rodney. So do you want to say what you said to what's in that document, or from your own words?
Maybe Sadie can read it. How about that?
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's incredible.
You're muted, Sadie.
Thanks, Pop. Yeah, I'll read it and then maybe you can tell a little bit, more about the context. But the statement, it says, Barnette stated, quote, "It is true that I'm living with a woman I am not married to. I don't think that you're going through a legal ritual of marriage determines the quality of relationship between man and wife. We maintain all the principles of any legal marriage. I think this is a personal thing that should be left up to the judgment of the two parties concerned, in accordance with their concept of what morality is. I honestly believe that such relationship has no bad effect on anyone concerned. So in conclusion, in my eyes, we are man and wife as much as anyone else. We have one child, born September 12th, 1968 at Cleveland, Ohio. He has my first two names and his mother's maiden name."
It's so beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Well, I think that's how we came into the movement. With it, we don't have to be trapped into what's officially legal or proper. We can make up in our own minds what we want to do with our lives without the government having to have the kind of pressure on us. And to fire me for living with a woman that I wasn't married to, cohabiting, conduct unlike a government employee, they called it. And actually,
Right.
Actually, it was used against people who were gay by the Truman administration to kick all gay people out of government jobs. So it's part of a presidential, I forget what you call it, they issue
Like an executive order.
From the Truman administration. So anyhow.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, Rodney, but we developed the concept, a relational concept of revolutionary love, which meant the broad spectrum of loving everyone, and then also loving whoever we wanted to love, not based in any binaries. And we were thinking like this in the late 60s when there weren't terms that we tossed around a lot. We didn't have language that we now have, and I'm glad we do have language now. But we just said, I get to love who I want to love. I might die tomorrow.
Right.
And we had good reason to think that we might. So, you know, on Tuesday, I'm with my boyfriend, and on Wednesday, I'm with my girlfriend. Hey, I'm living fully, understanding who I am. And we weren't judgmental about it. At least not, well, I guess I just didn't want to hear any of the judgments, but I didn't carry them. And we taught our children to be open and to feel free to be. And at the Oakland Community School as well. I mean, we had this whole perception of this vision of humanity, freed from all the shackles. And that's what I love so much about your statement.
We are coming close to about 5:30. We have about a few minutes, five or 6 minutes or so that we could look at questions. If anyone wants to, in the audience, would like to type a question into the chat, now would be a good time for anyone on the panel. I don't see any yet, so I think we could also keep talking, keep the conversation going, and if someone wants to, if someone enters a question into the chat, I'll let you know.
You know, I had something I wanted to bring out that really made me very angry when I looked at my file, and that is that the FBI not only surveilled me, harassed me, they did it to my entire family. And I tell the story about, there's 11 siblings in my family, and I know the order of my 2 sisters are the oldest, 9 boys after that, but I could never remember everybody's birthday. So in the FBI file, they have a family tree that they made with the dates of everybody's birth and how old they were. And not only that, when I got back from Vietnam, I came to California to go to my nephew's funeral who got killed in Vietnam. And his mother is my oldest sister. And then in the files is evidence that the FBI was going to my sister's house after her son gave his life for this country, and questioning her whether she's loyal to the country after giving her son up to the. Anyhow, there's things like that that really, like Ericka said, turn your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, but I appreciate you bringing that to the conversation and sharing that, because I think one of the things that this line of thinking and coming together as a community to create experiences is that when it's shared, we can relate and empathize And it also gets passed to the next generation, is teaching as well. So I appreciate the teaching that's there and that's going on, and that we carry each other's generational knowledge.
It's so important. And Valorie, I just noticed 2 questions in the
Great.
Q&A box.
Yeah, thank you. So Alexa, can you see this, Sadie, yourself, the questions, or I can read it for you?
You're
I think it's to me. Alexa Ramirez would like to know, Sadie, what do you think your younger self would have to say about your work today?
you're muted, Sadie. Okay.
I think my younger self, would probably just be proud of myself for finding a voice and, trusting it and using it. I think that, making this work is as much about, the political and social structures that we're under and that we struggle against, but it's also just about the complexities of being a person and being a spirit. And it's challenging sometimes to show up for yourself or believe in your voice and in your work. And, I'm so grateful that I have this arena that I can, be myself in and feel comfortable. And as I experiment, which is this thing, this contemporary art toolbox and community that I have. So I think, my younger self, who was like, having a terrible time in school, who basically dropped out of high school, who just wasn't, conforming to these systems, would just be so happy that I found a way to, participate and engage, that had an outward action that could then put me in community with people.
Mhm.
And Valorie, I also noticed that thank you, Sadie, that was so beautiful. That the question also asked, and what would the younger Rodney say about Sadie's work?
Mhm.
Like Rodney, when you were young. I thought that was an interesting question. If your younger self could see this work today, like after you were drafted or after you got back from Vietnam or after you joined the Black Panther Party, what would you say about it? I don't know. It's just an interesting question.
Yeah, well, it's hard to answer too, because I'm in reality just seeing this stuff and appreciating it now. But I think I would have the same reaction. Thank you for doing this. It's so beautiful. I'm so relieved that I've found out different things and mysteries that I've always thought about getting answers to. And I'm always happy about what I've done with my life, to tell you the truth. And I don't have any regrets about that. I always try to do the right thing, to fight for the right causes, and including against wars and so forth. So other than that, it's hard to answer.
Thank you.
Oh, you, Ericka.
Well, I was thinking about if so, Sadie, you're young and we are older now. Is she going like that? No, you're young, honey. No, but we're all youthful. Thank goodness. And so I was thinking about if, for instance, the incarcerated Ericka, who is grieving, a widow at 20-something, grieving her best friend who was also her husband, and without my daughter. If I had known a Sadie Barnette, I would have been ecstatic that somebody was brave enough to put it out there. And if you'd put it out there in the 60s, it probably would have gotten a different kind of response. But maybe not, because remember the Black Arts Movement, who said, we don't care what you think about it, we got to do this art. We got to do it. We got to do it. So I would have been ecstatic. Sometimes people would send me poetry if it passed the prison authorities. They'd send me books that were not just about politics. And sometimes I'd get pictures of art, of that art that was being made by young artists at the time. And if I had seen a redacted FBI document with roses, I would have cried. I would have made you my best friend some kind of way. It's like, it's a wonderful question to think about because it makes you look at it makes you look at your life trajectory. So when you're my age, Sadie, you'll look back and you'll go, huh, I don't know what you'll say, but you probably do.
I think we might have time for maybe one or two more questions. One of them that has been waiting for a few minutes is from Kathy. Yep. Who says she had a question about mindfulness and equanimity with white supremacy and seeding hope, but being moved to tears today. And so just sending everyone on the panel loving kindness. And if anyone would want to think about that question of mindfulness and equanimity in this process of resisting white supremacy.
Well, you know what? One of the things I want to point out, and Sadie always does, is that the toll that this whole FBI COINTELPRO took on people, we still have people in prison, accused and set up and innocent, and that we still need to work and fight for their freedom. And there's an estimate that during this whole COINTELPRO campaign, including the FBI and other law agencies, that they murdered over 3,000 people. It's not just like they killed a leader of the Panthers here and there, and 3,000 people died in relationship to this fight for justice and freedom in this country. So we still have work to do. And hopefully we're getting, encouraging other people to join and to correct what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yes, that's so true. And I think the way we do it, Sadie described you and I as positive and wanting to be uplifting. And that comes from a lot of self-inquiry. Like, we don't want to do it like the powers that be might do it in reaction to. And I think one of the things I loved about all of the movements that I've worked with over time since I was 18 is that the focus wasn't on the people who are doing the harm. The focus is on the people who had been harmed. What can we do? How can we serve? We had this motto in the Black Panther Party: we will serve the people, body and soul. And so we did. Our 65 community survival programs were very mindful. People need to eat. They need clothes, especially coats and boots on the cold East Coast. They need better education and free health care. We did all those things. I don't know how we did it. You know, since we didn't have any money, no one got paid. But we found ways to raise the funds. And we were very mindful about it. We were very, for instance, respectful and kind to the people in our communities because they had not received that kind of kindness. And I can specifically speak also to how I was for my own self when I was incarcerated in that very difficult 2 years. Is that I taught myself to sit quietly every day in order to be present with my baby daughter so that I wouldn't cry the whole way through the 1 hour I could see her on the one day of the week that I could see her. That's very mindful. I think we need to focus on who is in need, not what has been done, not just what has been done. We have to know what has happened in history. However, we are looking at it from, okay, so that happened. Okay, this happened. Okay, so what? Meaning, where's the action? And Sadie's approach to art, the art we've been talking about this evening, is very mindful. And I think that it's also important for us to take care of ourselves and for all people to decide that they have to do this inner work, not just the artists of color and the people of color, but everybody has to be self-reflective and mindful.
Well, I think on that note, we are at the end of our time together today. And I just would, from the heart, like to thank every one of you, Sadie and Rodney and Ericka and our organizers, Kiara, Rebecca, and Christopher and Blake, and just everyone who brought this event to fruition today. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who contributed questions, and everybody's typing into the chat right now. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude for all of you. So I just want to say thank you very, very much. And Sadie, wish you the best, and thank you for these wonderful installations and all the love that you bringing into circulation, you and Rodney. And thank you, Ericka, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Valorie. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you. I love you all. I love you, Pop. Love you, Ericka. Let it be known.
Right. That's one thing we need to do, is let love be known. That's right.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone. Take care.